I'm Jacob Mangley, and you are watching Comics Corner. Today, we're talking the Ultimates. Part of Marvel's Ultimate Comics line in the early 2000s, the Ultimates was the brainchild of Mark Millar, with art by the incomparable Brian Hitch. It was the fourth and least of the initial rollout, Ultimate Spider-Man, which started the line to massive critical acclaim and jump-started Brian Michael Bendis' career. Ultimate X-Men, also by Millar, that while having some definite flaws, a lot of it attributed to his writing, was still incredibly good and a nice little update. And Ultimate Fantastic Four, also by Millar, along with Bendis and with Warren Ellis of all people on the ride, along for the ride, creating a nice little cocktail's really good. So where's Ultimate stand in all this? Well, I called it the least, didn't it? And I do mean that. But despite that, it's had the most impact. While both Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate Fantastic Four have definitely influenced the movies, especially Ultimate Spider-Man with the first Spider-Man movie and bits of the two reboots after. Ultimates is responsible for Cap's look, Nick Fury's look, and at least going by early Ultimates and not his later bastard version, his kind of personality in the Ultimate Universe, and Thor's haircut. As well as introducing the Chitauri, though the version used by the films and later brought into the 616 universe is radically different, the name still came from there. And also Hawkeye's outfit, which I will always curse them for because fuck that stupid looking shades and thing combo that he's still sporting today. Yeah, I really do like the goofy old outfit. It looks awesome and was designed by was designed real well, while Brian Hitch really dropped the ball and they dropped it further. I'm getting off topic. The Ultimates was this line's answer to the Avengers. Since the Ultimate line was kind of a streamline of Marvel's continuity, starting a brand new one with elements from all over Marvel's vast history, allowing new readers to get in with a fresh continuity that may hook them to read the old one. It's not the best strategy because it doesn't get readers to read the continuity, and continuity does pile up with time. But it wasn't a bad idea. Reinventing the characters for a new century is a great idea. Yeah, and as I said, it was massively influential on the Avengers film. It really wasn't that bad an idea. It's just the problem is the brain behind it was kind of an asshole. Mark Millar is a very influential and famous writer in comics in his own right. The films based on Kingsman and Kick-Ass are some of the biggest hits outside of Marvel. Marvel with the Golden Circle coming later this month. And I'm also going to review his comic, The Secret Service, that led to the original Kingsman movie. To see how they compare, since I heard the original was vastly different. However, and that's not even getting into Logan, Fantastic, which he shouldn't really put as a feather in his cap, but it sucking isn't on him, and neither is the idea to use Ultimate Fantastic Four. And there's also Wanted, but like Fantastic, it's best forgotten. He has influenced a lot with his work. So what's the problem? The guy's a douche, comes off as a douchebag in said works. Mark Millar is very cynical. He makes no bones about that, and Ultimates itself was supposed to be a strike against war. However, he also that also makes it so a lot of the people in his works are assholes, because he seems to believe that just about everyone is an asshole and in the worst of humanity. He likes to use rape like it's Like, it's the fucking secret identity trope when it comes to comics, using it in almost all his works I've heard about. Now, the lion's share of the ones I've read, and once saying in a conference that's an acceptable literary device as with any other, and says something that should be used very sparingly and only when absolutely necessary due to just how fucking traumatic, horrifying, and nightmarish it is. I might get into this more later as we cover some of his works that actually have it, and I really don't want to get off on a tangent and make this review go on forever. But yeah, I do not like Mark Millar. I used to like him, but his work started to creep me out with age for good damn reason. Even his best work, Old Man Logan, has a lot of this cynicism and crap in it, as well as, of course, rape, because it's gotta have that rape. Ultimates, thankfully, doesn't, but pretty much every other negative trait I mentioned is there. But before I dive into the meat of it, for those of you who haven't really read Ultimates or haven't in a while, here's the plot. The 21st century is when everything changes. Though unlike Torchwood, with a pansexual captain and his quirky sex having crew and their pterodactyl fighting aliens and stuff, instead, Nick Fury, recent head of S.H.I.E.L.D. after events over in Ultimate X-Men, has decided to make his own batch of superhumans, both to discourage foreign invaders from attacking and to make them look good, and third of all, to have something to fight against the growing tide of mutants, Spider-Man, and what have you that's growing in the world. And then he recruits Bruce Banner, who previously in this continuity, though in an issue that's hard to get your hands on, he fought Spider-Man when he hulked out for the first time, and is really depressed. Together, they gather a team consisting of Hank and Janet Pym, a married team of a scientist, one of who created a growth formula, and the other who can shrink and is secretly a mutant. Tony Stark, drunken billionaire, has a giant tumor the size of a grapefruit in his head and is trying to make the most of the time he has left by getting into philanthropy, getting out of weapons, helping charities, and deciding to be a superhero because why the fuck not? Oh, and also banging everything that moves. Because no matter the continuity, this is still Tony Stark, and he is and will always be a man whore. And then finally, in the biggest element, we have Captain America, a hardcore patriot who came out of the ice after foiling an alien invasion. Now, Ultimates are assembled. They have to stop Banner, who, after being ridiculed by the rest of them and having his wife be a giant pile of jackass to him over just about everything, and while they're currently separated, and waving the fact she's dating Freddie Prinze Jr. in his face, because, that's a badge of honor. That's totally not going to be dated in a decade or so when his career has flatlined. No one but me remembers the sitcom Freddie, and no one would touch him with a 10-foot pole. Nah. Goes on a rampage of the Hulk, both prove himself to Betty and to give the Ultimates something to fight and the aliens Cap fought, who aren't so dead and have been covertly planning an invasion to take over Earth by fucking their way into the gene pool. No, really, that's a plot point. And it's actually kind of clever doing an invasion by generations that has been used in a lot of stuff. Crass, but it works. Which is the last thing I say for the rest of Ultimates. The style here is While Brian Hitch's art fits the realistic tone and is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm just going to compliment it some more before we go on, perfectly complements the action scenes, and is the best part of this. Seriously, just Brian Hitch is responsible for all the stuff that carry on, and it's just great. Let's get talking back to the asshole side of this. But the tone is just cynical and grimy. Everyone is an asshole. Well, this is a common complaint about the Ultimates as characters, especially in comparison to the rest of them. And keep in mind, this is a universe where Wolverine started out as an assassin whose main motivation for turning face was to bang Jean Grey, who's barely legal in this universe, so ew. And a Charles Xavier who's way too damn cavalier with his mental powers. Also by Miller. Who'd have thunk? And a Magneto, rather than a well-intentioned extremist, is a giant genocidal asshole. Look, I could go on about Ultimate X-Men, but I'm not reviewing that. My point is, with interpretations like that still somehow work in ways, the Ultimates still come out looking worse than all of those people. People. The Ultimates are assholes who, while the perception of caring only about fame or celebrity is wrong, they're still selfish. They still come off as whiny, and as such, the tone's just unpleasant. Everyone's a douchebag. Only one character is halfway decent, and that's the Wasp. No way I was wrong, too. Bucky, who I'll get to, trust me, not the kind of Bucky you're usually thinking of. But still the same character. It's a reboot, okay? So about 2 or 3 characters aren't assholes, only one of the major leads isn't. Well, okay, Nick Fury really isn't either, but give him time. So about maybe 2 characters out of the main cast aren't assholes. And since the characterization's the biggest problem, let's dive into it, shall we? We'll start with the big blue cheese himself, Captain America. Now, in most universes, especially the 616 main Marvel universe, and yeah, I know it's weird that it's not Earth 1 like DC, but I still kind of like that universe 616 rather than the first, and it's kind of clever. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Cap is a beacon of hope, a nice guy. And despite growing up in the 40s, is unprejudiced as hell because he was raised right by his mother. Mother who was a beacon of hope and light in his life. Even with the recent retcons of his father's abusive, it still works because she never gave up on him and helped her son through that crap. He believes in America, but will go against his country when necessary. And this is a shocker, Frank Miller, no relation, of all people, wrote one of the best Cap scenes of all time in the amazing comic Daredevil Born Again, which I will review at some point. I know I'm saying that a hell of a lot, but yeah, it's the best Daredevil story of all time, despite some of Frank Miller's own flaws. And has a great line when Cap, confronting a general over the fact he found out about Nuke, who's basically a government's attempt to make another him during Nam that is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs due to the amount of horrifying PTSD he has. He says, "Are you loyal to America?" trying to shut him up. Cap's response, "I'm loyal to nothing, General, except the dream." That, to me, is Cap. A man who will go against his country if necessary, but will do everything for it. Loves it more than anything else and will go to the bat for people. This Cap is none of those things. See, Mark Miller really doesn't like the military. He doesn't like glorifying it, and he seemed to think that it was unrealistic a guy would be progressive. So he made him progressive for his time. He has no problem working with Nick Fury and everything, but this Cap is a jingoistic pile of fucks. While there is still good parts, like him realizing that everyone he knew is dead, the only two people he has left are his fiance, who married his best friend Bucky, who grew to actual old age he rather than become the Winter Soldier because the story happened first. And has lost everything when Nick points out one thing he didn't. A flag. But it still doesn't excuse him for being a giant macho asshole who's a character of everything wrong with the 40s. And don't get me wrong, the 40s fucking suck and were terrible. No one is arguing that. What I am arguing, though, is that I'd rather have a character who is the best parts of humanity and despite growing up in a time like that became a progressive, optimistic person than a jingoistic ass who thinks he's better than everyone, likes to punch everyone in the face, and is just a giant condescending bully who jacks off to the American flag. He doesn't actually do that last part. Would you really be surprised? At one point during the final battle, he says, "What do you think this?" When the villain's telling Surrender, he says, "What do you think this A stands for? France?" And while Cap's a little ashamed of it later, surprisingly, Fury's laughing about it, and it's clearly supposed to be taken seriously in universe, even if Mark Miller likely meant it as a parody. Apparently, the Ultimate's supposed to be deconstruction and an anti-military piece. The problem is the Avengers are supposed to be the best and brightest of the Marvel Universe. Having this be a deconstructive military piece ruins that. And the Cap's the biggest example of that. He's just a giant pile of dicks that's just constantly annoyingly unpleasant to everyone around him. The one person he treats decently is the Lost when he beats up her abusive husband, who we'll get to shortly. But that's about it. Even that comes off as jingoistic and being a schoolyard bully. Cap's the guy who punches bullies in the face or stands up to them even if he doesn't have the power. He is not the bully. I do not care how much you hate the military, Mark, which sometimes we do need. But I do admit that at the time with the Iraq War and everything going on, it was a serious problem. And wars, people sometimes do trigger wars over the stupidest shit. However, using Captain America to make fun of that, and making Captain America a giant flaming asshat just because you want to make the military is not okay. Even taking him on his own, the character's thoroughly unlikable and he's a center point and it wrecks the story. By making your lead a giant, thorough douchebag who no one wants to associate with, you alienate your audience other than the kinds of douchebags who are gung-ho about the military for the wrong reasons because they want to blow up foreigners. Which backfired horribly because apparently some people told him they enlisted because of this version of Cap. And he's like, no, that's not what I was getting at all. I find that both hilarious and really sad this asshole could inspire anyone. Speaking of assholes, what in the fuck did they do to Hank Pym? For those who don't know who Hank Pym is, he's a scientist who can change his side. You saw him in Ant-Man. He's a little younger in the main Marvel universe. Versus being just a 5 or 6 years older than Scott Lang at that. Rather than have been around decades of the generation before. But he's a good scientist. He also went through a very public breakdown where he accidentally hit his wife. Horribly regretted that. And was also, due to undiagnosed mental problems, attacked the Avengers with a robot, worked with supervillains, and had a colossal fucking breakdown that ended with him in prison, him getting acquitted, but deciding to quit superheroics due to what a douche is, and then seeking help, returning later, and only becoming a superhero once he'd fully and truly recovered. And while his mental issues have been present since, for the most part, he stayed a very great hero. Even now, when he's been fused to his creation Ultron, he created Ultron in the Marvel Universe. Long story, not going to get into it. I've gone on long enough about shit that has nothing to do with this review. he's a good man. But even here, he comes off as nice and charming at first, but then he just suddenly becomes abusive. Which, granted, can happen in real life, and I do applaud him on that. A lot of abusers come off as charming, and you don't realize it until it's happened. And since Betty Ross knew Jan in college, she knew he took chunks out of her hair. The problem is that Miller takes this to the extreme. As discussed in better detail in Mr. Interview of Screams and Silence from the show Silence, an episode of Family Holistic Abuse, portraying the exact extreme does not help domestic abuse. It basically makes people who emotionally abuse their spouses think it's okay, the same kind of assholes who are taking this comic seriously, or think that, okay, because I'm not trying to murder you when you're at microscopic size by spraying you with bug spray and sticking my ants on you. It's a horrifying scene and a well done one, but at the same time it's unnecessary, gratuitously over the top, and basically excessive violence to your one main female character. It was actually pretty good. Wasp does flirt with other men, but given what she's dealing with, you can't really blame her. And when she does fight with Hank, it's because he's basically being a racist asshole, saying, oh, they wouldn't love you if they knew you were a mutant, and blah, 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 which would be true for some people, but Tony Stark will bang just about anything, and Cap, while an asshole, doesn't seem to be a racist asshole at this point. We'll see when I get to Ultimates 2, but my point is, she's a fairly likable and sympathetic character, but she gets horribly abused twice. The other time she gets shoved in a bottle when she tries to escape a hospital. Not only that, but while I do applaud trying to tackle domestic abuse when it's done correct, here it's not. Here it's just basically there because look at the shocking thing that happens in real life, only taken up to 11. I mean, what's the narrative purpose here? To get Hank Pym out of the way so he's not in the climax, to make things a little tougher, and to get Jan in the hospital so she can get captured by the bad guys. Not only is that mildly sexist that one of the only two female characters you have and the only major one in this volume, or at least the ones that are on the team, is basically getting captured. And while she does take out the Hulk via his brain, really awesome, she's basically just there to get captured. It comes off incredibly sexist and forced. It feels like all Mark Miller knew about Hank Pym was he hit his wife once and based his science and based it off that and turned him into a villainous asshole. It only gets worse from what I've heard and what little I've seen of the next volume. It's disturbing, and even taking it out on its own, the characters are basically just flat woman character who hits on people and wants to quit after being horribly mutilated and having Captain America beat up her husband, and horrible, nightmarish domestic abuser. It's just awful. Hank Pym, as I said, did his damnedest to make up for it. He even started the Maria Pym Foundation for battered women in the name of his ex-wife who died tragically before he met Jan. And he's gotten back together with Jan a few times, but it's never really worked out. But he's never abused her once again. Or any of his partners. And while it always haunts him, he goes on trying to be a hero anyway. Even while he does have an ego, he does back it up some of the time. Once telling Reed Richards it's on, bitch, when Reed was a condescending dick to him. As you can tell, I like Hank Pym a lot, and that's part of the anger, but as I said, the other half is the fact that basically he uses abuse as a cheap narrative device when he could have done anything else, and even still had Hank be emotionally or physically abusive without him fucking nearly murder her with ants. It's just disgusting. And not in the, oh, because it's bugs way, in the, he basically used horrifying abuse against a human being who was naked at the time in order to make himself look good, in order to be edgy. That pretty much sums up the Ultimates in a nutshell. It's just disgustingly uncomfortable and stupid. Just, do we still have to do the rest of this? I'm going on. I'll save the other real bleh of a character for last. Let's move on to some tamer waters. Iron Man is basically a caricature of Tony Stark. Like with Hank Pym, it feels like one of the few things Miller heard about him, despite reading Spider-Man as a kid. And probably reading some Iron Man as a kid, no doubt. Now, is that he's drunk. Like, seriously, the roll call comes up as I'm an asshole. I'm a woman. I'm an abusive white puncher. I'm a hippie, man. I'm drunk. But the weird thing is, despite being drunk all the time, not only does Tony kind of a justification, I mean, alcoholism should not be justified, but he's a giant tumor, so he should be treated for his alcoholism. You can kind of understand why he's drinking all the time. Doesn't make it okay in the slightest, and it's still a slap in the face to alcoholics, especially ones who were helped by Demon in a Bottle or its sequel. Well, during Tony Stark's mind games with Obadiah Stane. But Tony's probably the most likable. Does he sleep with pretty much any woman who will let him, including hitting on the first lady at the time? Yeah. Does he treat these women like crap? No. He pretty much seems to be entirely upfront. He just wants to fuck them, treats them to fancy dates, including taking Shannon Elizabeth into space, and is probably the nicest of the Ultimates. A lot of people would probably go on a hedonistic bender, especially millionaires like Tony, when they found out they were dying. Tony? Okay, I'll do something good for my life for once. Maybe be a superhero for a bit. Also bang a lot of hot women. Women like I have been doing, but take it into overdrive. Tony is the most likable and sympathetic of the Ultimates. Men's. As an actual team, not counting Nick Fury. And he's the one who has a serious alcohol problem and is kind of a douche. But he doesn't treat Bruce Banner like crap. He doesn't hit his wife. He's not a jingoistic asshole who I celebrated his death after reading this comic. He's the one of the only two Ultimates I'm glad got recently brought back to life and into the main Marvel Universe. Yeah, Hank's back. Cap thankfully got killed, which again, it's just great. But yeah, the psychotic wife beater's back. Yay. I'll continue this. Yeah, it's not a good situation, and that's the other reason. They brought the Ultimates back, minus Cap, partly because of Secret Empire, and partly because no one wants that douchebag back, or an evil Cap after Secret Empire. These characters are in the Marvel Universe and don't deserve it. But I haven't talked about the big asshole in the room because I spent so damn long ranting about Cap and Hank. I haven't even get to the Hulk. As I said earlier, the Hulk is a villain. Bruce Banner is thoroughly sympathetic because he's under a lot of stress, and while he does do something stupid and make himself a villain for the Ultimates, he doesn't realize how bad it will be, and it's constantly dogged, and has to deal with his bitch of an ex-wife. Betty Ross in this comic is probably the most reprehensible person, and a person next to Hank Pym And again, I'll remind you all this crappy stuff I said about Captain America, because fuck this version of Captain America. Betty treats Bruce like shit. They're currently on a 6-month separation. She uses their relationship, or I'll make it permanent if you don't make this work. Treats him like garbage, despite for stuff not under his control, like not only one of the Ultimates showing up for a press conference when Tony Stark is busy. Cap has to deal with some stuff, or may have not existed at that point. And they haven't gotten Thor yet, who we'll get to, but he isn't quite as bad. Hulk, however, is just... On one hand, I'll give him credit. I like the idea that it's more Bruce Banner's id, even more so. That this version of Hulk tries to deal with Banner's problem. He goes after Betty. He gets violently jealous for him. The problem is, Hulk is just as much an asshole as well as a violent sociopathic monster, because Mark Miller forgets that despite all the people the Hulk's accidentally killed, he is not a monster. He is a beast. He attacks. He fights, but he's also like a small, like a oversized child that's lashing out at a world that fears and hates him. It's more complicated than that. Here, he fucking eats people because that's dark and edgy, mate. Yeah. I don't know what that accent was. I just know fuck Mark Miller. Just... This comic is a fucking mess. And the Hulk's a huge part of it. He also talks about he wants to fuck Betty, so, you know, implied sexual assault. Not Mark's usual style, but close enough. God, just... Okay, and there's also Thor, Nick Fury. Nick Fury, well, seen as a manipulative asshole, here he's really fun and cool, and basically I think they mostly based the Avengers movies, Nick Fury, on this version rather than what this Nick Fury later become. He has more of a sense of humor, he's a bit hipper, but he's also still every bit as badass and in command as the original. Oh, he's also played by Samuel Jackson, and you can't take that away from him. Thor is He's basically just a hippie. It's ambiguous whether he's a god or not, though he does get an awesome moment in the climax where he teleports a bomb into another dimension. And after everyone believes Tony's being fucking insane for calling on him for help when it's pretty much the last solution Tony has. Again, Tony's the most likable. He and Thor go partying around the world, partying around the world, partying around the world. Crystals, meth! No prize if you get that in the comments. If that reference and put it in the comments. Again, Thor is likable because while he is a hippie and he's like, oh, well, your wars, I won't be part of your lapdogs. After, the worst thing he does is basically hold the president up for money Ultimate Warrior style, but instead of just being a greedy ass fuck, he's like, just double the international aid budget and I'll help your team. It's still douchey given the Hulk's murdering thousands of people, but compared to the other douchiness on display by the Ultimates, which is almost entirely selfish, Thor just wants to help internet people overseas and doesn't want to work for a government he hates, and thus agrees to help the Ultimates and becomes Tony's pal, but is not technically a member at the end of the first volume, because he doesn't want to be part of it. To which Cap says, fine, say Uncle Sam is going to pay for you. Because subtle military commentary. Subtle military commentary. Subtle military commentary. I apologize. This comic is wearing on my sanity. Alright, so last few members. Hawkeye and Black Widow join, with Black Widow being enhanced, and she has a much larger role I won't spoil, well, in part 2, it's letting me know. And Hawkeye, both of which are just kind of superfluous. Black Widow's mentioned fucking Tony Stark at one point, and both of them do find out the Chitauri invasion's going on and clue the Ultimates in. But they're both just kind of assholes. Black Widow just doesn't really do much. Which again is why I call Lost the only real female member of the team. Black Widow doesn't do much or join till towards the end. Betty is a giant asshole and all major character. I just hate her so much for just being so horribly abusive. Yes, Bruce is kind of a neurotic mess, but then divorce him. Don't use your goddamn marriage to as blackmail material to make yourself look good. Jesus. Hawkeye's just an ass who yells at Jan for calling on Tony on comms for help because it gets him shot, even though, you could not answer. And she is just trying to get him down to the basement to dismantle a bomb using his genius. I mean, again, he gets a god to get rid of it, but her logic is sound. So yeah, they're just kind of generic and asshole-ish, but they do get more focus next time, so I'll talk about them more next time. Then you have Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, who are the most infamous of the Ultimates and of any Ultimate characters because they fuck each other. Yes, they're still brother and sister in this continuity. While it's only implied in Miller's run, they're basically hanging off each other all the time. It's really just gross. Though to Quicksilver's credit, I will give him one thing. He does have a really funny running gag that happens at least 3 times where they could say, "Oh, you didn't do anything." Like lampshading the fact the mutants aren't too involved because, well, they're former terrorists in this continuity and did far worse things than they did in the regular one. So yeah, they're hiding for a reason. But he's like, check the security cams. It's really funny. It just reminds me of that SpongeBob Bagger's like, want to see me run that mountain back? You want to see me do it again? It just reminds me of that, but toned down a bit. A bit more subtle, and it's hilarious. And one of the few gags that lands. Let's try to have a sense of humor. The France line, a few jokes, the pop culture references, again, Freddie Prinze Jr. Not to mention the fact that, though I will say the Hulk trying to murder Freddie Prinze Jr. will never not be funny just because of how fucking bizarre it is. There is one funny, if kinda, look, we're adult gag where the Wasp flashes the Hulk to get his attention so you can lure him over to the rest of the Ultimates. A bit juvenile, yeah, but they lampshade it with him going, with Nick Fury telling her over the comms, 3-peat AHDs and this is the best you could think of. It worked, didn't it? It is fairly funny just because it comes right at her flashing the Hulk. Hulk comes right out of nowhere and it's hilarious and it's for an actual purpose in the story. But yeah, overall, as I've talked more about the characters, that's mostly because the story's just kind of a popcorn action movie story. It's not that big or deep, but it works for what it is. And as I said earlier, Brian Hitch's art, amazing. The action, amazing. The actual characters, a lot of the story outside of one scene where Steve goes to talk to Bucky and he's glad to see his friend again, but his old fiancee Gail won't face him just because she doesn't want him to see her like this, which is just really tragic. Like outside of stuff like that, it's just really flat. You're basically just falling a lot of assholes. Even Tony, who's probably the best among them, is still a selfish douche who will bang anything that moves and is drunk all the time and refuses to seek help despite what little time he has left. It's basically just about a bunch of horny assholes because this is what it feels like Mark Miller thinks of superheroes. Instead of the best among us who, despite their problems, march forward and fight with everything they got, they're instead just selfish douchebags fighting because they have to for the most part. Part of bastardized classic characters, even on their own, and separating them from the original incarnations, which is really damn hard to do. Even taking that away, they're still not likable or interesting characters. They're just two-dimensional assholes with maybe one or two character traits. I'd say one-dimensional, but they do fill them out. And even the ones that are just awful have many dimensions to their douchebaggery. They're just a bunch of cardboard cutout douchebags fighting a bunch of random aliens who are basically just Skrulls, but not really. Really, in an asshole version of the Hulk. It's not that interesting or dynamic, and it's really faded with time. I do get what people see in this and saw in it at the time. The action's dynamic. It was edgy. It was dark. But at the same time, people wearing a lot of leather, lots of edginess for the sake of it. Are we talking about the 2000s or the 90s? This comic just feels like, for its time, a massive step back, even taking it as a product of its time, and now is just a massively dated mess from a time when people did edgy shit just to make a comic look good. The Ultimates isn't that good. It has good action scenes, good character design. Basically, the art should still be celebrated. I'm glad to still see it on products. But everything else about it is skippable. So, you could probably register the fact that a horrible caricature of Hank Pym and a just that version of just version of the Hulk being in the Marvel universe isn't something I'm particularly happy about. But we'll see how it goes. Next week we're looking at Harbinger. For those of you who don't know what that is, stay tuned. For those of you who do, we're going back a bit further than the one you're thinking of. Unless you're thinking of the 90s, which in that case, get on the bus and also the bus next time. I'll see ya. See ya. And until next time, I'm Courage. And stay away from Mark Miller.